Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day 8 of the holiday card series for 2016. Today I'm going to be using the Nativity stamp set and dies to create a trifold card. These are from Art Impressions and they do a phenomenal job coming up with some card ideas to use with their stamp sets. In fact, they include all of the instructions on the back of the stamp packaging. So I'm going to be doing my card strictly based on their instructions, and I'm just going to add a little bit of coloring to make it my own. So I've started out with some Bristol paper. I'm using Bristol paper because I will be coloring the whole scene with some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. So I've cut this piece of Bristol paper to 4.5 by 11, and then I'm scoring 3 5/8 from each end. That'll create 3 panels that I'll use for my card. So I'm going to fold in the 2 sides so that I can see how it's going to be sized. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on the stamping of the 3 panels. The first panel I'm working on is the front. And according to their instructions, you should stamp the larger stamp image, which is it's the stable with the donkey out in front. And you should stamp that about 1 3/4 from the top of the card, kind of just nestled there in the bottom section. So I'm using some Onyx Black VersaFine ink. It's a waterproof ink, so it'll be perfect for the markers I'm using today. And I'm stamping that down. I'm using my mini Misty tool just because I wanted to have a little bit more ability to move around the stamps and make sure I get them in the right spot. So now I'm taking the coordinating die that goes with the stamp set. It all comes in one packaging. You don't have to buy it separately. And I just cut out that area in the middle using a Big Shot tool. So you can see how it cuts out that area right in the center. And now I'm going to fold over the second flap and then the front. And I'm going to take a pencil and lightly pencil around that opening that I've die cut. And this is going to give me a guide for stamping the next stamp onto that panel. So I'm taking the next stamp, and I wanted to make a little mark on the actual stamp so I knew how wide that opening was on the image. So I just used a Sharpie marker to do that. It's definitely totally optional. I was just a little bit of a perfectionist and wanted to make sure that that opening was going to line up with the other one. So I swung the door over so it picked up the stamp, and now I'm using the same ink to stamp the second image. I did want to mention that since I'm using these cling stamps, I took out that foam piece out of the Mini Misty so that it could accommodate the thicker stamps. So I'm taking that coordinating die for the second image, and I'll use a little bit of Post-it tape to hold that down as well, and then run that through my Big Shot machine. Now here's where I had a little problem. You'll notice when I show you after it's cut, there's a ghost image from that first stamp. I didn't realize that the ink would transfer onto my cutting plates or my cutting pads. So I'm actually going to do a little bit of stamp surgery. First going to clean up that cutting pad so that I don't have any problems in the future when I use it or run it through my Big Shot machine. And then I'm going to cut this front panel off of that card base, and I'm going to glue it down onto a new card base that I've already scored. So I'm just creating a new card base. I wanted to salvage that first panel that I've already stamped and die cut, and so I just glued it on. So now we have a new card base here. I'm going to redo that second step, and this time it worked beautifully. I didn't have any ink transfer, and I was able to cut out that center area in between the lambs without any problem. So now I'm going to close up that second panel, and I'll again use a pencil and pencil in that window so I know exactly where to stamp the baby Jesus. So I'll pencil that in. And as well as this one, I wanted to make sure it lined up so you could see the baby's face through the opening. So I was very careful to stamp it like that. And then now here's the sentiment from that stamp set. It says, "Oh, come let us adore him." I think is what it says, or "Come let us adore him." And I wanted to make sure that it was going to stamp straight, so I put down a piece of Post-it tape, and then I inked up my stamp and I stamped it down, and I saw that okay, it was pretty straight. So I'm going to take off that Post-it tape. I just needed it just to get the positioning right. and I'll go ahead and try again and stamp it onto my card base. This is something you'd have to do only with cling stamps because you can't see exactly where the image is through the foam. With a regular or a clear stamp, you wouldn't have to do that additional step with the Post-it tape. So that is how the 3 panels fold in all together. I'm going to go ahead and start coloring using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I'm just going to erase the pencil lines really fast, and then I'll go ahead and start coloring. To add some stars in the sky on the front panel, I used a white gel pen. This is a Uniball Signal Broad white gel pen, and I got the idea to add these additional stars from the stamp packaging. Art Impressions does a phenomenal job with their packaging. Their images are colored really beautifully on the front, and so I just used that as some inspiration. In fact, most of the colors that I used are directly inspired from that stamp packaging, so I can't recommend it enough. I think that they're fantastic. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card. I will be back on Wednesday with day 9, and until then, thanks so much for watching.